Picture this. It's 2:17 a.m., and Sarah lies in her bed like a prisoner in her own body. Her muscles ache with exhaustion, her eyelids heavy as stones, yet her mind races like a runaway train through the darkness. Tomorrow's presentation plays on repeat. That awkward conversation with her boss gets dissected word by word. She even finds herself mentally reorganizing kitchen cabinets she organized just last week. Sound familiar? If you've ever felt that bone-deep loneliness of being the only person awake in a sleeping world, you're not alone. Sarah's nightly battle is shared by over 100 million people worldwide who fight this invisible war every single night. But here's what most people don't realize. Sarah isn't just tired. Something far more complex is happening inside her brain. Something that's literally rewiring her most basic human need for rest. This is insomnia, and it's hijacking millions of lives in ways we're only beginning to understand. Insomnia isn't simply having a few bad nights or tossing and turning occasionally. It's a sleep disorder that fundamentally rewrites the architecture of your nights and demolishes the foundation of your days. At its core, insomnia is persistent dissatisfaction with your sleep. Whether you can't fall asleep, can't stay asleep, or wake up feeling like you never truly rested at all. Here's the cruel irony. It's not that people with insomnia don't want to sleep. Their exhausted bodies are practically screaming for rest. The problem is, their brains simply won't let them. For decades, doctors treated insomnia like a symptom, something that tagged along with depression, anxiety, or other health problems. But groundbreaking research has revealed a startling truth. Insomnia is often the ringleader, not the sidekick. It doesn't wait politely in line behind other conditions. Instead, it frequently leads the charge, creating a cascade of problems that ripple through every aspect of life. When we look at duration, insomnia comes in two main varieties. Acute insomnia lasts less than 3 months and usually has a clear trigger: job loss, divorce, a medical scare that shakes you to your core. Most people bounce back once the storm passes. But chronic insomnia is the persistent troublemaker, showing up at least 3 nights a week for 3 months or longer. It becomes a self-sustaining cycle, a disorder that literally feeds on itself. So what transforms a few rough nights into years of sleeplessness? Sleep researchers have cracked this code with something called the 3P model, and it explains why some people develop chronic insomnia while others recover from difficult periods. Think of insomnia like a fire. You need the right conditions for it to start, something to ignite it, and fuel to keep it burning. The setup, predisposing factors. Some people are simply more vulnerable to sleep disruption. It's like having drier kindling. Age plays a crucial role here. As we get older, our sleep becomes more fragile, less resilient to disruption. Women face additional challenges, especially during the hormonal roller coasters of menstruation, pregnancy, and menopause, when estrogen and progesterone, our body's natural sleep aids, fluctuate wildly. Genetics matter too. If your family tree is full of night owls and insomniacs, you might have inherited that restless legacy encoded in your DNA. The spark, precipitating factors. These are life's curveballs that initially knock your sleep off track. Major stress from work, relationships or health scares, the death of a loved one, financial crisis, physical injuries that make comfortable sleep impossible. Even positive changes like a new job or marriage can disrupt sleep patterns. These events are the matches that light the insomnia fire. The fuel, perpetuating factors. Here's where things get insidious. These are the behaviors and thought patterns that keep insomnia alive long after the original trigger has faded. You might start spending extra hours in bed trying to catch up on sleep, which actually weakens your natural sleep drive. Like trying to eat when you're not hungry. You begin associating your bedroom with frustration instead of rest. Your mind starts spiraling with catastrophic thoughts. I'll never sleep. I'm going to be exhausted tomorrow. I'm losing my mind. The real villain in this story is something called cognitive hyperarousal. Essentially, your brain getting stuck in overdrive mode. Think of it like having a car with a broken idle switch. Even when you're parked and want to rest, the engine keeps revving. Your mind becomes hypervigilant, scanning for threats, analyzing problems, making mental to-do lists. This creates a vicious cycle where anxiety about not sleeping becomes the very thing preventing sleep. Your brain literally learns to be afraid of bedtime.
But insomnia doesn't wear the same mask for everyone. It shapeshifts, adapting its torture to fit each individual's vulnerabilities. Take Alex, a 28-year-old software engineer who's begun to dread sunset. As he slides under his covers each night, his mind immediately shifts into hyperdrive. Lines of code scrolling behind his closed eyelids, tomorrow's deadlines looming like storm clouds. He feels tired but wired, that maddening state where bone-deep exhaustion wages war with mental alertness. 2 hours might crawl by before sleep finally claims him, leaving him irritable and cognitively foggy the next day, his problem-solving abilities dulled by the nightly battle he keeps losing. This is sleep onset insomnia, the cruel gatekeeper that bars entry to the realm of rest. Maria, a 55-year-old high school teacher, faces a different demon. She falls asleep easily enough, grateful for the day's end. But like clockwork, she jolts awake at 2 a.m., her mind instantly flooded with classroom worries and family concerns. She lies there for hours in the oppressive darkness, watching minutes crawl by on her bedside clock, her mind churning with anxieties that seem magnified in the vulnerable hours before dawn. She only drifts off again when morning light creeps through her curtains, just in time for her alarm to sound. This is sleep maintenance insomnia, the midnight thief that steals rest during our most vulnerable hours. Then there's John, a 35-year-old veteran whose insomnia intertwines with post-traumatic stress like thorns around a rose stem. His hyper-vigilant mind, trained by combat experience, won't allow the surrender that healthy sleep requires. When exhaustion finally overpowers his vigilance, trauma-soaked nightmares jolt him awake, heart pounding, drenched in sweat, thrust back into memories he desperately wants to escape. This is comorbid insomnia, where sleep problems dance with other health conditions in a complex, often bi-directional relationship. John's insomnia doesn't just follow his PTSD, it feeds it, creating an exhausting cycle where each condition amplifies the other. Different paths, same prison of sleeplessness. When someone like Sarah finally seeks help, diagnosing insomnia becomes detective work, piecing together clues from the crime scene of disrupted nights. Unlike many medical conditions, you can't diagnose insomnia with a simple blood test or brain scan. Instead, it requires careful investigation of the patient's lived experience. The process often begins with a sleep diary, a detailed log patients keep for 1 to 2 weeks, tracking bedtimes, wake times, sleep quality, and influencing factors. It's forensic evidence, revealing patterns invisible in the moment, but clear when viewed over time. How much caffeine did you consume, and when? What was your screen time before bed? How many times did you wake up, and what thoughts were racing through your mind? Clinicians use tools like the Insomnia Severity Index, a questionnaire that quantifies just how much havoc sleeplessness wreaks on someone's life. It measures not just difficulty falling or staying asleep, but the ripple effects, interference with daily functioning, worry and distress caused by sleep problems, satisfaction with current sleep patterns. Here's what surprises people. Sleep studies, those overnight tests in specialized labs, aren't usually needed for straightforward insomnia diagnosis. Polysomnography, the technical term for sleep studies that monitor brain waves, breathing, and body movements, is reserved for cases where doctors suspect other culprits masquerading as insomnia, like sleep apnea or restless leg syndrome. For most people with classic insomnia, their own testimony provides the most crucial evidence. It's a condition diagnosed through storytelling, through the patient's subjective experience of their private battle with sleeplessness. Here's the hopeful twist in Sarah's story, and yours. Insomnia can be conquered. The same brain that learned to fear sleep can be retrained to embrace it again. The gold standard treatment isn't a pill. It's a therapeutic approach called cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, or CBTI. Think of it as boot camp for your brain, retraining it in the lost art of natural sleep. CBTI works for up to 80% of people, and unlike medications, its benefits often last long after treatment ends. It's like teaching your brain to ride a bicycle again. Once it remembers how, it rarely forgets. CBTI employs several powerful techniques that work together like instruments in an orchestra. Stimulus control helps your brain relearn that bed equals sleep, not frustration. If you can't fall asleep within 15 to 20 minutes, you get up and do something quiet in dim light until sleepiness returns. It's like retraining a pet. Your brain needs consistent signals about what different environments mean. Sleep restriction sounds counterintuitive, but works brilliantly. It temporarily limits time in bed to match your actual sleep time, building up sleep pressure like a dam collecting water. If you're only sleeping 5 hours but spending 8 hours in bed, you'll initially spend only 5 hours in bed. As your sleep efficiency improves, you gradually increase bedtime. Cognitive restructuring tackles those anxious thoughts spiraling through your mind at 3 a.m. It transforms catastrophic thinking, "I'll never sleep, I'm losing my mind," into more realistic, less anxiety-provoking thoughts. "This is temporary. I've slept before, and I will again." The beauty of CBTI lies in addressing root causes, not just symptoms. While a sleeping pill might knock you unconscious for a night, CBTI rewires the behavioral and cognitive patterns that sustain insomnia. It's the difference between putting a Band-Aid on a wound and actually healing the underlying injury.
Medications certainly have their place in insomnia treatment, but they're more complicated than most people realize. Sleep medications can provide short-term relief during particularly difficult periods, but they come with significant caveats. Benzodiazepines and Z-drugs like Ambien can provide quick relief but carry risks of dependency, next-day grogginess, and even dangerous sleep behaviors like sleepwalking, sleep eating, or sleep driving. The FDA has issued serious safety warnings about some of these medications after reports of people engaging in complex behaviors with no memory of their actions. Even over-the-counter options aren't as harmless as they appear. Melatonin supplements, while generally safer, aren't regulated like prescription medications. Studies have found that melatonin content can vary wildly from what's listed on labels, sometimes containing anywhere from 74% to 347% of the claimed amount. The fundamental issue with sleep medications is that they don't address the underlying thought and behavior patterns that maintain insomnia. It's like taking painkillers for a broken bone without setting it properly. You might feel better temporarily, but the real problem remains unfixed. Insomnia's cruelest trick is how it escapes the confines of nighttime, hijacking your entire existence. It doesn't just make you tired, it makes you a stranger to yourself. If you've ever forgotten your own sentence midway through speaking, if you felt like you're watching your life through fog, struggling to connect with people and activities you once loved, you understand insomnia's cognitive toll. The statistics paint a sobering picture. People with chronic insomnia are 2.5 to 4.5 times more likely to be involved in accidents, especially while driving. Their reaction time slowed, their judgment impaired by exhaustion. They face roughly double the risk of developing depression. Their immune systems become compromised, leaving them vulnerable to every passing cold and flu. Their cardiovascular health suffers as stress hormones remain elevated. Their risk for chronic diseases like diabetes increases as sleep deprivation disrupts glucose metabolism. Approximately 1/3 of adults experience insomnia symptoms, making this not just a personal health crisis, but a public health emergency with far-reaching consequences for safety, productivity, and healthcare costs. The workplace becomes a minefield of forgotten details and missed opportunities. Relationships suffer under the weight of irritability and emotional unavailability. Hobbies and passions that once brought meaning fade into obligations you're too exhausted to fulfill. Perhaps most cruelly, insomnia creates feedback loops with other health conditions. Chronic pain triggers insomnia, but sleep deprivation lowers pain tolerance, intensifying the original pain. Depression disrupts sleep, but insomnia increases depression risk, creating a bidirectional cycle where each condition feeds the other. Yet within this landscape of exhaustion and frustration lies profound hope. The same neuroplasticity that allows chronic sleeplessness to take hold also enables recovery. Every night offers a new opportunity to practice better sleep habits, challenge anxious thoughts, and rebuild the association between bed and rest. Sarah's story doesn't have to end at 2:17 a.m. staring at the ceiling in defeat. With the right tools and support, she can reclaim her nights, and with them, her days.
The journey isn't always linear. There may be setbacks and challenging nights, but the destination is achievable. Natural, restorative sleep that allows her vibrant spirit to return. Modern technology has democratized access to these life-changing treatments. Digital CBTI platforms now deliver the same evidence-based techniques that were once available only in specialized sleep clinics, guiding users through sleep restriction, stimulus control, and cognitive restructuring from their own homes. The brain that learned to fear sleep can learn to trust it again. But what happens when the problem isn't your racing mind keeping you awake, but your own body betraying you in the night? What if instead of lying awake thinking, you're unknowingly fighting for each breath, your throat collapsing dozens or even hundreds of times while you sleep? Up next, we'll explore a sleep disorder that's as common as it is dangerous, one that affects millions who have no idea their lives are at risk every single night they close their eyes. Welcome to the hidden world of obstructive sleep apnea, where the enemy isn't insomnia's whispered disruption, but a roaring silence that could be deadly.
In the quiet suburbs of Denver, Mark Thompson lies in bed at 2:47 a.m. To anyone watching, he appears peacefully asleep. But beneath the surface, a life-threatening drama plays out every single night, one that's happening in bedrooms across the world, largely unnoticed and misunderstood. Mark's story isn't unique. At 47, this project manager has spent the last decade dismissing the signs. The thunderous snoring that sends his wife Rebecca to the guest room. The morning headaches that feel like a hangover without the drinks. The bone-deep exhaustion that no amount of coffee can touch. Most telling of all, the moments of terrifying silence that Rebecca has started to notice when the snoring suddenly stops and Mark's body goes completely still. What Rebecca witnesses in those silent moments is her husband's airway completely collapsing. His brain, starved of oxygen, triggers an emergency response that partially wakes him with a desperate gasp. This cycle repeats throughout the night, sometimes 60 times or more, turning what should be restorative sleep into a nightly battle for survival. Obstructive sleep apnea, or OSA, is fundamentally a structural problem with a devastating impact. Imagine your throat as a soft-walled tunnel that needs to stay open for air to flow freely. In people with OSA, the muscles that keep this tunnel open relax too much during sleep. The soft tissues, including the tongue, soft palate, and throat walls, collapse inward, creating a roadblock that stops airflow entirely. The word apnea comes from Greek, meaning without breath. When doctors say someone has an apnea, they mean breathing has stopped for at least 10 seconds. But here's what makes this condition so insidious. These breathing interruptions can last much longer, and they can happen dozens of times every hour throughout the night. Each time the airway closes, oxygen levels in the blood drop dramatically, sometimes by 40% or more. The brain, sensing this oxygen crisis, floods the body with stress hormones and partially awakens the person just enough to restart breathing. Heart rate spikes, blood pressure surges, and the body experiences the physiological equivalent of a panic attack. Then, as quickly as it began, the person falls back into deeper sleep, and the cycle begins again.
This nightly pattern of suffocation and recovery creates a cascade of health problems that extend far beyond poor sleep. When Mark's sleep study revealed he was experiencing 47 breathing interruptions per hour, nearly one every minute, his doctor explained that his body had been living in a state of chronic stress for years. Each oxygen drop triggers the release of stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. Over time, this constant state of emergency takes a severe toll. Blood pressure remains elevated even during waking hours. The heart muscle, forced to work harder night after night, begins to show signs of strain. Insulin resistance can develop as stress hormones interfere with blood sugar regulation, and studies suggest 24 to 31% of people with type 2 diabetes may also have sleep apnea, particularly in those with obesity. The brain suffers too. The repeated oxygen drops damage the areas responsible for memory, attention, and emotional regulation. People with untreated OSA often experience symptoms that mirror depression and anxiety, not because they're mentally ill, but because their brains are literally being starved of oxygen every night. Perhaps most troubling is the increased risk of cardiovascular events. Studies show that severe, untreated sleep apnea can increase the risk of stroke by 40% and significantly elevate the chances of heart attack and sudden cardiac death. The very act that should restore and heal the body becomes a nightly assault on every major organ system. Diagnosing OSA requires watching someone sleep with scientific precision. The gold standard test is called polysomnography, a comprehensive sleep study that sounds more complex than it is. Poly means many, somno refers to sleep, and graphy means recording. So polysomnography literally means recording many aspects of sleep. During this overnight study, sensors monitor brain waves to track sleep stages, eye movements to detect REM sleep, muscle activity to observe when the body naturally becomes paralyzed during deep sleep, and most importantly, airflow and breathing effort. Elastic belts around the chest and abdomen measure breathing movements, while a small sensor near the nose and mouth detects actual airflow. An oxygen sensor clipped to the finger continuously monitors blood oxygen levels. When Mark underwent his sleep study, the results painted a stark picture. The technician recorded 376 breathing interruptions during his 8-hour study, an average of 47 per hour. During these episodes, his oxygen levels dropped as low as 73%. Normal is 95 to 100%. His brain showed frequent arousals, brief awakenings that prevented him from reaching the deep, restorative stages of sleep his body desperately needed. For those who can't access a sleep lab, home sleep apnea tests offer a simpler alternative. These portable devices monitor the essential metrics: airflow, breathing effort, oxygen levels, and heart rate while you sleep in your own bed. While less comprehensive than a full sleep study, these tests can effectively diagnose moderate to severe OSA in most cases. The most effective treatment for OSA has an unfortunate image problem. CPAP therapy, continuous positive airway pressure, essentially acts as a pneumatic splint for the airway. The machine generates a constant, gentle stream of pressurized air delivered through a mask worn over the nose, mouth, or both.
This positive pressure keeps the soft tissues from collapsing, maintaining an open airway throughout the night. Modern CPAP machines bear little resemblance to the bulky, noisy devices of decades past. Today's units are whisper quiet, often producing less sound than a modern refrigerator. The masks have evolved too, with options ranging from minimal nasal pillows that rest just at the nostrils to full face masks for mouth breathers. Advanced features include heated tubing to prevent condensation, automatic pressure adjustments based on breathing patterns, and even smartphone apps that track compliance and effectiveness. The transformation that CPAP can bring is often dramatic and immediate. Within days of starting treatment, Mark noticed changes that seemed almost miraculous. The crushing morning headaches disappeared. The mental fog that had clouded his thinking for years began to lift. His energy returned, his mood improved, and for the first time in years, he felt genuinely rested upon waking. Rebecca noticed changes too. The thunderous snoring that had driven her to the guest room was gone, replaced by the gentle whisper of the CPAP machine. More importantly, she no longer lay awake in terror, listening for those moments when Mark's breathing would stop entirely. While CPAP remains the gold standard treatment, it's not the only option. For people who struggle with mask therapy, oral appliances custom-fitted by dental specialists can gently reposition the jaw and tongue to keep the airway open. These devices work particularly well for people with mild to moderate OSA. Weight loss can be transformative for many people with OSA, as excess tissue around the neck and throat contributes to airway obstruction. Even a 10% reduction in body weight can significantly improve symptoms and in some cases eliminate the need for other treatments entirely. Surgical options range from removing excess tissue in the throat to more complex procedures that reposition the jaw or implant devices that stimulate airway muscles. One innovative treatment, called Inspire therapy, involves implanting a small device that monitors breathing patterns and stimulates the hypoglossal nerve, which controls tongue movement, keeping the airway open during sleep. The dangers of leaving OSA untreated extend far beyond poor sleep quality. People with untreated sleep apnea are 7 times more likely to be involved in motor vehicle accidents, their reaction times slowed, and judgment impaired by chronic sleep deprivation. Workplace injuries occur 3 times more frequently among those with untreated OSA. The condition ages the brain prematurely with cognitive decline that can mimic early dementia. Relationships suffer as irritability, mood swings, and decreased interest in social activities become the norm. The person who once brought energy and enthusiasm to their family and work slowly fades into a shadow of their former self. Yet, perhaps the most tragic aspect of OSA is how often it goes unrecognized. Studies suggest that up to 90% of people with moderate to severe sleep apnea remain undiagnosed. They live with a condition that significantly increases their risk of stroke, heart attack, and premature death, believing they simply snore loudly or are getting older. Mark's journey from nightly suffocation to restorative sleep represents hope for millions of people living with undiagnosed OSA. His story illustrates that what we often dismiss as normal signs of aging or stress may actually be symptoms of a treatable medical condition. The transformation isn't just about better sleep, it's about reclaiming life itself. Energy returns, relationships improve, and the constant background hum of exhaustion finally fades away. The machine that once seemed like a burden becomes a bridge back to the person you used to be. But sleep's mysteries don't end with breathing disorders. Sometimes the very legs that carry us through our days become the source of our nighttime torment, creating sensations so compelling that rest becomes impossible. In the next part of our journey through sleep disorders, we'll meet someone whose legs simply won't let her be still, whose nights are haunted by an irresistible urge to move that medicine is only beginning to understand.
We've seen how the mind can sabotage sleep and how the throat can steal breath in the night. But what happens when your legs, your own legs, become the enemy of rest? Meet Ilara, a 47-year-old architect who designs spaces for others to find peace. Ironic, isn't it? Because when darkness falls, peace is the one thing her own body refuses to give her. Picture Ilara at 10 p.m., finally settling into her reading chair after a demanding day. Her mind is ready to unwind, her book is open, the house is quiet. But then it begins, a sensation she struggles to put into words because there's nothing quite like it in human experience. It starts as a whisper deep in her calves, not pain exactly, not an itch you can scratch. Imagine tiny electrical currents running along the inside of your bones, or bubbles of restlessness fizzing through your muscle fibers. Some nights it feels like ants marching through her veins. Other nights it's a deep, gnawing urgency that screams one message: move, now, don't stop. This is her nightly visitor, restless legs syndrome, and despite its simple name, there's nothing simple about living with an irresistible urge that owns your evenings. Here's what makes this condition particularly torturous. It has perfect, devastating timing. RLS doesn't strike randomly. It follows a schedule that seems designed to maximize suffering. It whispers at dinner, speaks up during evening relaxation, and shouts loudest between 11 p.m. and 4 a.m., exactly when your exhausted mind is begging for stillness. Why this timing? The answer lies in a delicate dance happening inside your brain every single day, a dance between two crucial players, dopamine and iron. Think of dopamine as your brain's movement conductor, orchestrating smooth, controlled motion throughout your body. This chemical messenger follows a natural daily rhythm, surging in the morning around 8 a.m. when you need energy and alertness, then gradually declining to its lowest point around 3 a.m. when your body should be at rest. But here's where things go wrong in RLS. Iron deficiency in the brain throws this entire symphony off key. Iron isn't just what prevents anemia. It's essential for dopamine production and regulation. When your brain doesn't have enough iron, it panics and overcompensates during the day, pushing dopamine production into overdrive. Then night arrives. Dopamine naturally drops as it should, but the overworked system crashes harder than normal. The result? A dopamine deficit at precisely the moment when your legs need steady, calm signals. Instead, they receive chaotic, urgent messages. Something's wrong. You need to move. Don't stop moving. It's like having a car with faulty brakes. During the day, you can manage, but when you try to coast to a stop at night, the system fails catastrophically. Ilara has learned to read her body's signals. She recognizes the pre-storm quiet that means her legs are about to revolt. She has developed a strange relationship with movement, pacing her hallway at midnight, doing calf stretches at 2 a.m., sometimes dancing alone in her kitchen just to give her legs what they're demanding. The hardest part isn't the physical discomfort, it's the isolation. Try explaining to someone that you can't sit through a movie because your legs are buzzing. Try making them understand why you need to stand up during important meetings, or why long flights feel like torture chambers. Just relax, well-meaning friends suggest. Have you tried meditation? If only they understood. This isn't stress or anxiety. This is neurology gone rogue. This is brain chemistry betraying the very person it's supposed to serve. The medical community has only recently begun to truly understand RLS as the legitimate neurological disorder it's always been. For too long, patients were dismissed, told their symptoms were all in their head or simply signs of stress. We know better now. We know this affects up to 10% of adults, with women twice as likely as men to experience it. We know it can run in families, passed down like an unwanted inheritance through generations.
Sometimes RLS arrives with obvious calling cards. Iron deficiency that shows up in blood tests, pregnancy hormones that trigger symptoms, or kidney disease that disrupts normal iron processing. These cases are almost gifts because they point toward clear solutions. But often, RLS is more mysterious. It can be triggered by antidepressants, antihistamines, or anti-nausea medications, drugs meant to help that accidentally become part of the problem. Sometimes it shows up during periods of stress, illness, or major life changes. And sometimes it simply appears one day and decides to stay, like an uninvited guest who's made themselves at home. Diagnosing RLS isn't about fancy scans or complex blood work. It's about storytelling. Doctors listen for the signature pattern, symptoms that worsen with rest, improve with movement, peak at night, and create that unmistakable urge to move. They distinguish it from other conditions that can masquerade as restless legs: arthritis, peripheral neuropathy, or simple muscle cramps that cause pain but not that urgent, compelling need for motion. Ilara's path to better nights wasn't a single breakthrough. It was a series of small victories that added up to something like relief. Her doctor discovered that her iron levels, while technically normal on standard tests, were actually insufficient for proper brain function. More detailed testing revealed ferritin levels, the body's iron storage, that were dangerously low. Iron supplementation helped, but it took months to see improvement. Iron doesn't fix RLS overnight. It's a slow rebuilding of the brain's chemical infrastructure. While waiting for supplements to work, Ilara learned other strategies: avoiding caffeine after 2 p.m., incorporating more movement into her day. Ironically, active legs during daylight hours meant calmer legs at night, and creating evening routines that worked with her condition rather than against it.
Her neurologist prescribed gabapentin instead of the older dopamine medications that used to be first-line treatment. Why the change? Because those dopamine drugs, while initially effective, often led to a phenomenon called augmentation, where symptoms gradually worsened over time, spreading from legs to arms, starting earlier in the day, requiring higher and higher doses. The very medicine meant to provide relief could become part of the problem. Gabapentin works differently, calming overexcited nerves without directly manipulating the dopamine system. It's not perfect. No treatment for RLS is, but it gave Ilara some of her evenings back. Perhaps the most important thing Ilara learned was to stop fighting her condition and start working with it. When symptoms hit, she moves. She's created a toolkit of activities that satisfy her legs' demands while keeping her mind occupied. Gentle stretching routines, adult coloring books, puzzles, or simply walking through her house while listening to audiobooks. She's learned that warm baths can provide temporary relief, that certain sleeping positions minimize symptoms, and that stress and sleep deprivation make everything worse, creating a vicious cycle where RLS steals sleep, and lost sleep feeds RLS. Most importantly, she's learned that RLS doesn't define her. It's a neurological quirk she manages, not a character flaw or personal failing. On bad nights, she moves. On better nights, she rests. Both are victories in their own way. But here's what makes Ilara's story particularly intriguing in the broader landscape of sleep disorders. Her restless legs only act up when she's awake to feel them. She's learned to manage the sensations, found ways to work with her condition, and most nights can eventually find sleep. But what if we told you there's a related condition where legs move just as restlessly, just as persistently, but the person experiencing it has no idea it's happening? What if the movement occurs entirely during sleep, leaving someone exhausted each morning with no memory of their legs' nightly rebellion? This is where our story takes a fascinating turn, because while Ilara battles her restless legs in conscious awareness, there are others whose legs tell their own story in the depths of sleep, a story that unfolds without the sleeper ever knowing they're the main character.
We've explored the torment of lying awake when sleep won't come, the terror of breathing that stops in the night, and the maddening urge to move when rest should come naturally. But what happens when your body develops its own secret choreography, one that plays out entirely without your knowledge? Meet David Chen, a 47-year-old architect who would swear on a stack of blueprints that he's an excellent sleeper. 8 solid hours every night, dead to the world from the moment his head hits the pillow. Ask him about his sleep, and he'll tell you with complete confidence, "I sleep like a baby." Ask his wife Elena, and you'll hear a completely different story. It's like sleeping next to a marionette whose strings are being pulled by an invisible puppeteer, Elena explains, dark circles shadowing her eyes. Some nights I count the movements: kick, twitch, jerk, pause, kick, twitch, jerk. On the worst nights, I've counted over 200 separate movements between midnight and dawn. Here's what makes this story so bewildering. David remembers none of it. 0.
He wakes up refreshed, stretches leisurely, and asks Elena how she slept, while she sits there looking like she survived a small earthquake. Yet despite his certainty that he's sleeping well, David drags himself through each day with a bone-deep exhaustion he can't explain. It's as if he's tired for reasons that don't seem to exist. What's happening to David is called periodic limb movement disorder, or PLMD. Imagine your nervous system as a sophisticated communication network that usually operates with perfect timing. During the day, your brain acts as mission control, coordinating every movement with precision. But when PLMD strikes, it's as if part of that network develops its own agenda once you fall asleep. These aren't the familiar conscious movements you might make when trying to get comfortable in bed. This is your body's version of sending Morse code messages while your brain is completely offline. Every 20 to 40 seconds, sometimes with the regularity of a metronome, your toes flex upward, your ankles jerk, your knees might pull up toward your chest. Each movement lasts just a few seconds, but they arrive in waves that can continue for hours. The most unsettling part, unlike restless leg syndrome, where you're desperately aware of every uncomfortable sensation, PLMD happens in complete stealth mode. You feel absolutely nothing. Your legs are having an entire conversation, and your conscious mind never gets invited to the meeting. Picture this. Elena lies next to David, feeling every tremor travel through their shared mattress. She's become an unwilling seismologist, measuring the intensity of each movement, timing the intervals between episodes. On quiet nights, the movements are gentle, barely noticeable nudges. On active nights, they're strong enough to wake her from deep sleep over and over again. I started keeping a notebook, Elena admits, not because I wanted to, but because I thought I might be going crazy. How do you explain to someone that you're exhausting you while they're completely unconscious? The cruel irony is that David's sleep is being shattered too, but in a way that's invisible even to him. Each leg movement triggers what sleep specialists call a micro-arousal, a brief moment where his brain almost wakes up but doesn't quite reach consciousness. It's like being gently shaken awake 200 times a night, but never enough to actually remember it happening. Think of it this way. Imagine you're watching a movie, but every 2 minutes someone pauses it for 3 seconds, then hits play again. You'd never lose track of the plot, but by the end, you'd feel somehow unsatisfied, like you never got to fully experience the story. That's what's happening to David's sleep. His rest is being fragmented into tiny pieces, and his brain never gets the chance to complete its nightly restoration work.
When Elena finally convinced David that something was wrong, they found themselves in the surreal world of sleep medicine. The only way to catch PLMD in action is through a sleep study. Essentially, spending the night in a medical facility where machines watch you sleep with the dedication of professional detectives. David spent one night in a sleep lab, connected to sensors that could detect things his own awareness couldn't. Electrodes on his legs measured every muscle twitch. Monitors tracked his breathing, heart rate, and brain waves. It was like having a surveillance team that specialized in the unconscious. The sleep technicians weren't just looking for random leg movements. They were hunting for a very specific pattern. To diagnose PLMD,
they needed to document at least 15 movements per hour, with each movement lasting between half a second and 5 seconds, occurring in sequences of 4 or more, spaced 5 to 90 seconds apart. David's results were definitive: 23 movements per hour throughout the night. His legs had been having a marathon conversation every single night for months, possibly years, and finally someone was there to translate what they were saying. The beauty of David's treatment wasn't in its complexity, it was in its simplicity. His sleep specialist started with what she called sleep hygiene, basically teaching David's nervous system better nighttime habits. No caffeine after 2 p.m., because stimulants can amplify the electrical misfiring that causes PLMD. A consistent bedtime routine to help his brain transition more smoothly into sleep. Morning sunlight exposure to strengthen his natural sleep-wake cycle. When lifestyle changes weren't quite enough, his doctor prescribed a low dose of gabapentin, a medication originally developed for seizures, but remarkably effective for overactive nerve signals. It's not a sledgehammer approach. Think of it more like installing a dimmer switch on his nervous system's nighttime chatter. The changes were gradual but unmistakable. Within a month, Elena was sleeping in their bed every night again, instead of escaping to the guest room. David began waking up feeling like he'd actually slept instead of just lying horizontal for 8 hours. The invisible earthquake had finally quieted. What strikes me most about David and Elena's journey is how easily this could have remained forever unsolved. David wasn't complaining about leg pain or cramping. He was just tired. Tired in a way that seemed unreasonable but wasn't dramatic enough to demand attention. Elena could have permanently moved to the guest room, and they both might have accepted that as just another compromise of middle age. This is the particular challenge of invisible sleep disorders. They gaslight you in the gentlest possible way. When you're exhausted, but technically you were asleep all night. When your partner says you're kicking, but you have no memory of movement. When everyone around you seems to function fine on the same amount of sleep that leaves you drained, you start to question your own experience. The relief that comes with finally having a name for what's happening, with understanding that this is medical rather than personal failure, is impossible to overstate. David wasn't lazy or getting old before his time. Elena wasn't being unreasonably sensitive. They were dealing with a real condition that had real solutions. David's story reveals how sleep can betray us in ways we never notice. His body was in constant motion while his mind rested peacefully, completely unaware of the chaos happening below. But PLMD represents just one way our sleep can turn against us. What we're about to explore next is perhaps even more disorienting. What happens when the fundamental timing of sleep itself breaks down? When your brain decides it's time to dream not during the safety of night, but in the middle of a conversation, a meal, or while you're driving down the highway. We're entering the bewildering world of narcolepsy, where the boundary between waking and sleeping doesn't just blur, it vanishes entirely, often at the most inconvenient and dangerous moments imaginable. If PLMD is your body keeping secrets from your mind, narcolepsy is your mind keeping secrets from itself, never quite sure whether it's time to be awake or time to dream. Picture this. You're 19 years old, standing in front of a packed lecture hall, about to present the computer program you've spent months perfecting. Your heart pounds with excitement, not nerves, but pure joy. This is your moment. You open your mouth to speak, and then darkness. But you're not unconscious. You're not fainting. You're asleep, standing upright in front of 100 people, dreaming while your laptop hums quietly beside you. Your body has become a prisoner to your own brain's broken commands. This is Malik's reality. Brilliant computer science major, debate team captain, a young man whose own emotions have become his greatest enemy. Because every time he feels joy, excitement, or even surprise, his muscles might simply give up. What if I told you that for some people, laughter is dangerous? That the very emotions that make us human can literally bring us to our knees? What if your brain's most basic function, the simple act of staying awake when you need to, became completely unreliable? Welcome to the hidden world of narcolepsy, where sleep isn't rest, it's an ambush. Most people think narcolepsy is about being really tired, like someone who just needs more coffee or better sleep habits. But imagine if I told you that narcolepsy is actually your brain forgetting how to tell the difference between being awake and being asleep. It's as if the fundamental boundary that separates consciousness from dreams has completely collapsed. Think of your brain as having a master control room for sleep and wakefulness. In a healthy brain, this control room has clear switches: awake during the day, sleep at night. But in narcolepsy, it's as if someone has taken a sledgehammer to the control panel. The switches fire randomly, the boundaries blur, and suddenly the vivid dreams that belong safely in nighttime sleep start bleeding into your waking hours. This neurological storm affects roughly 1 in every 2,000 people, about 200,000 Americans. Yet most of them don't even know they have it. They suffer for years, sometimes decades, being labeled as lazy, unmotivated, or worse. Because how do you explain to someone that your brain has declared war on your consciousness? Malik's story begins like so many others, with confusion, frustration, and a healthcare system that doesn't understand what it's seeing. At 16, Malik started falling asleep during his AP classes. Not the gentle nodding off we've all experienced, but sudden, overwhelming episodes where consciousness simply vanished. His teachers assumed he was staying up too late gaming. His parents worried about his commitment to school. Even Malik began to doubt himself. But then came the day that changed everything. He was watching a comedy special with friends, laughing harder than he had in months, when suddenly his knees buckled. His jaw went slack. His arms fell limp to his sides. Yet his mind remained crystal clear, trapped inside a body that had completely shut down. His friends thought he was joking, until they saw the terror in his wide-open eyes. This wasn't fatigue. This wasn't laziness. This was cataplexy, a phenomenon so strange that even many doctors don't recognize it. The word comes from Greek, meaning to strike down with fear, but fear isn't what triggers it. Joy does. Laughter does. The very emotions that make life worth living become the ones that can literally knock you off your feet. What's happening in Malik's brain during these episodes is both fascinating and terrifying. You see, during normal REM sleep, the stage where we dream, our brains naturally paralyze our muscles to prevent us from acting out our dreams. But in narcolepsy with cataplexy, this muscle paralysis gets triggered by strong emotions while the person is completely awake. It's as if the brain's wiring has gotten crossed, and the safety mechanisms of sleep are being activated at all the wrong times. Narcolepsy comes in 2 main forms:
and understanding the difference is crucial to understanding the condition itself. Type 1 narcolepsy is what Malik has, the full storm, complete with cataplexy. This happens because of something called hypocretin deficiency. Now, hypocretin might sound like scientific jargon, but think of it as your brain's master wake-up chemical. It's like having a morning alarm system that keeps you alert and prevents dream stage sleep from crashing your daytime consciousness. In type 1 narcolepsy, over 90% of the brain cells that produce this crucial chemical have been destroyed. Imagine if 90% of the lights in a city's electrical grid suddenly went dark. That's what's happening in the brain's wake-promoting system. Type 2 narcolepsy is quieter, but still devastating. People experience the overwhelming daytime sleepiness and sudden sleep attacks, but without the dramatic muscle collapse of cataplexy. Their hypocretin levels are usually normal, which makes this form more mysterious and harder to understand. But here's what's unsettling. Type 2 can evolve. Some people initially diagnosed with type 2 later develop cataplexy as their condition progresses, shifting them into type 1. It's like watching a neurological storm gather strength over time. For Malik, living with type 1 narcolepsy means facing what doctors call the tetrad, 4 core symptoms that transform everyday life into an unpredictable battlefield. But let me tell you what this actually feels like beyond the medical terminology.
The sleep attacks. Imagine you're typing an important email, focused and alert. Suddenly, without any warning, you're in REM sleep. Not drowsy, asleep. Dreams flicker behind your eyelids while your fingers continue typing gibberish. You might drive for miles with no memory of the journey, your brain on autopilot while your conscious mind dreams. This isn't the tiredness you feel after pulling an all-nighter. This is your brain's wake-promoting system simply shutting down without notice. The cataplexy. A funny meme makes Malik's knees buckle. Good news from a friend causes his speech to slur. A moment of joy becomes a moment of vulnerability as his muscles decide to take an unauthorized break. Throughout these episodes, his mind remains fully alert, aware, watching helplessly as his body betrays him. The attacks can be subtle, a slight drooping of the eyelids, or complete, causing total collapse. But the consciousness never fades. The sleep paralysis. Malik wakes in his dorm room, mind sharp and alert, but his body refuses to respond. He can't move, can't speak, sometimes can't even breathe properly. It's as if his body is still locked in the muscle paralysis of REM sleep while his consciousness has fully awakened. These episodes last only minutes, but they feel like hours of being trapped inside your own body. The waking dreams. As Malik drifts toward sleep or begins to wake, vivid hallucinations flood his senses. He sees intruders in his room, hears voices calling his name, feels phantom hands touching him. These aren't nightmares, they're dream content spilling into waking consciousness. Often occurring alongside sleep paralysis, they create a horrifying experience of being awake, aware, paralyzed, and haunted by visions that feel absolutely real. The mystery of why this happens has finally begun to unravel, and the answer reveals one of medicine's most tragic cases of friendly fire. In type 1 narcolepsy, the immune system, our body's protector, launches a precise, devastating attack on the very brain cells that keep us awake. Here's how the tragedy unfolds. Nearly everyone with type 1 narcolepsy carries a specific genetic variation called HLA-DQB1*06:02. This genetic marker is found in only 12 to 38% of the general population, but over 98% of type 1 patients have it. It's one of the strongest genetic associations ever discovered with any disease. But genetics alone don't cause narcolepsy. The trigger appears to be infections, particularly H1N1 influenza and streptococcal bacteria. When the immune system fights these invaders, something goes catastrophically wrong. Through a process called molecular mimicry, the immune system mistakenly identifies the brain's hypocretin neurons as threats because their proteins look similar to the infectious agents. It's a perfect storm of biological misfortune. Genetic predisposition meets environmental trigger, resulting in the immune system accidentally destroying the brain's own sleep-regulating cells. Your body's defense system becomes the very thing that steals your ability to stay awake. To get to this understanding requires surviving what many patients call a diagnostic odyssey, and Malik's journey is heartbreakingly typical. His symptoms began at 16, but he won't receive an accurate diagnosis until his late 20s. That 13-year gap is normal. The average delay is 8 to 15 years, sometimes even longer. During those years, Malik collects misdiagnoses like unwanted souvenirs, depression, ADHD, epilepsy, sleep apnea. He's told he needs better sleep habits, more discipline, stronger willpower. He sees psychiatrists who focus on his mood, neurologists who can't find seizure activity, and family doctors who suggest he's just a typical sleepy teenager. Each wrong turn adds to his growing sense that maybe he really is just lazy. Maybe he really does lack the drive that others seem to have naturally. The toll of this diagnostic wandering is immense. Academic performance suffers not just from sleep attacks, but from the crushing weight of being constantly misunderstood. Depression affects up to 57% of people with narcolepsy, more than 10 times the rate in the general population. When society tells you that your medical symptoms are character flaws, it's hard not to internalize that message. When Malik finally sees a sleep specialist who recognizes the signs, the diagnostic process unfolds in carefully orchestrated stages. First comes an overnight sleep study, where sensors monitor every aspect of his sleep: brainwaves, eye movements, muscle activity, breathing patterns. This isn't primarily to diagnose narcolepsy, but to rule out other conditions and ensure he gets adequate sleep for the crucial test that follows. The next morning brings the multiple sleep latency test, the MSLT, which sounds clinical but is actually quite simple. Malik is given 5 opportunities to nap at 2-hour intervals throughout the day. The test measures 2 critical things: how quickly he falls asleep and whether he enters REM sleep abnormally fast. For a narcolepsy diagnosis, he must fall asleep in under 8 minutes on average and enter REM sleep quickly during at least 2 naps. For definitive confirmation of type 1, doctors can analyze Malik's cerebrospinal fluid through a lumbar puncture, testing for hypocretin levels. Low levels, less than 110 picograms per milliliter, provide biochemical proof that his wake-promoting neurons have been destroyed.
Once diagnosed, Malik enters a complex world of treatment that requires constant balance and adjustment. There's no cure for narcolepsy, but the symptoms can be managed through careful orchestration of medications, lifestyle changes, and psychological support. For the crushing daytime sleepiness, Malik might take modafinil or armodafinil, medications that promote wakefulness by boosting dopamine in specific brain regions. Unlike traditional stimulants, these are less likely to cause dependence, though they can trigger headaches, anxiety, and in rare cases, severe skin reactions. Newer options like solriamfetol and pitolisant offer additional choices, each with their own benefits and risks. For cataplexy and nighttime sleep problems,
sodium oxybate becomes crucial. Taken at bedtime, this medication dramatically improves deep sleep quality, which reduces both cataplexy episodes and daytime sleepiness. But it comes with serious warnings. It's chemically identical to GHB, the date rape drug, and can cause dangerous breathing problems, especially when combined with alcohol or other sedatives. Antidepressants help suppress REM sleep, reducing cataplexy, hallucinations, and sleep paralysis. The doses used aren't for depression. They specifically target the REM sleep abnormalities that create these terrifying symptoms. Beyond medications, Malik learns to build his life around strategic napping. Short 15 to 20-minute power naps at carefully timed intervals can dramatically improve alertness for hours. He maintains rigid sleep hygiene, same bedtime and wake time every day, even on weekends. Regular exercise helps too, as does avoiding large meals that can trigger post-meal sleepiness. Perhaps most importantly, Malik discovers he's not alone in this fight. Support groups connect him with others who understand the unique challenges of living with an invisible, misunderstood condition. Cognitive behavioral therapy helps him develop coping strategies for the anxiety and depression that commonly accompany narcolepsy. The real weight of narcolepsy isn't just the symptoms. It's the profound isolation that comes from being misunderstood. But there's hope in recognition. Narcolepsy is recognized as a disability under the Americans with Disabilities Act, meaning schools and employers must provide reasonable accommodations, flexible schedules, break time for naps, priority class registration, note-taking services. World Narcolepsy Day, observed every September 22nd, works to raise awareness and reduce the stigma that makes this condition so isolating. Because when society understands narcolepsy as a neurological disorder rather than a personal failing, everything changes for people like Malik. Today, Malik has learned to build his life around sleep rather than fighting against it. Is it perfect? No. But it's manageable, and that matters more than perfection. He's pursuing his computer science degree, leading his debate team, and slowly helping others understand that his symptoms aren't character flaws, but medical realities that deserve compassion, not judgment. His story reveals something profound about the human experience, how a single broken system in the brain can reshape an entire life, and how understanding and empathy can help restore dignity to those fighting invisible battles. It shows us that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply stay awake for the life you want to live. Malik's brain forces him to sleep at the most inconvenient times, but at least he can eventually find sleep when he needs it. But what happens when your internal biological clock falls completely out of sync with the world around you? When your body desperately wants to sleep during the day and stay wide awake all night, fighting against every social convention and practical necessity of modern life. Next, we'll explore the hidden chaos of circadian rhythm sleep disorders, where timing is everything and everything is perfectly, disastrously out of time.
Here's a question that might sound strange. What if I told you that millions of people are living in the wrong time zone without ever leaving home? Picture Diana, 17 years old, sitting in her guidance counselor's office for the third time this semester. Late to first period, again. Her parents think she's rebellious. Her teachers think she's lazy. The counselor is suggesting she just try harder to get to bed earlier. But here's what none of them understand.
Diana isn't choosing to stay awake until 3 a.m. Her body literally won't let her sleep before then. While her classmates' brains start whispering sleepy time around 9 p.m., Diana's brain doesn't get the memo until after midnight. She's not broken, she's not lazy, she's living in a biological time zone that's completely out of sync with the world around her. 3 time zones away, Miguel is stumbling through another brutal night shift at the hospital. His 3rd shift in a row. Every cell in his body is screaming that it's time to sleep, but the patients need him. His internal clock, that ancient biological system that's kept humans alive for millions of years, is at war with his work schedule, and his body is losing. And then there's Marcus. He lost his sight in a car accident 2 years ago, but what happened next surprised everyone, including his doctors. His sleep schedule began drifting. This week, he goes to bed at noon and wakes up at 8 p.m. Next week, it'll shift again and again, like he's trapped on a slow-moving carousel of sleep, always out of step with everyone else's rhythm. 3 people, 3 different battles, but they're all fighting the same invisible enemy, a body clock that refuses to tick in time with the world. Deep inside your brain, nestled behind your eyes, sits one of evolution's most incredible inventions. It's smaller than a grain of rice, contains about 20,000 neurons, and it's been keeping perfect time for millions of years. Scientists call it the suprachiasmatic nucleus, but think of it as your body's master conductor, orchestrating a symphony of biological rhythms you never even notice. This tiny cluster of cells is conducting an orchestra of your entire body every single second. It tells your liver when to process food. It signals your kidneys when to work hardest. It whispers to your heart when to slow down for sleep. It commands the release of dozens of hormones: cortisol to wake you up, melatonin to wind you down, growth hormone to repair your body while you rest. And here's the truly remarkable part. If you took these cells out of your brain and put them in a laboratory dish, they'd keep ticking, perfect rhythm, day after day, even without sunlight, without clocks, without any connection to the outside world. They're that committed to keeping time. But evolution played a fascinating trick on us. This internal clock doesn't run exactly 24 hours. It runs about 24.5 hours, which means that without daily resets, without constant signals from the world around us, we'd gradually drift later and later each day, like a watch that runs just slightly slow. For millions of years, this wasn't a problem. The sun was our daily reset button. Bright morning light hitting special cells in our eyes would send a direct message to that tiny timekeeper. This is dawn. This is day 1. Reset to 0. But now we live under artificial lights, stare at glowing screens, and follow schedules that have nothing to do with sunrise or sunset. For most of us, this system is remarkably adaptable. It bends, it adjusts, it finds a way to sync with our modern world. But for millions of others, people like Diana, Miguel, and Marcus, something goes wrong. Their internal clock isn't broken exactly, it's just different. Running on its own time, following its own rhythm, unable or unwilling to march in step with everyone else. Let's go back to Diana, sitting in that guidance counselor's office. What she has is called delayed sleep phase disorder, and it's like being permanently stuck in a different time zone. While her friends' bodies start preparing for sleep around 9 p.m., releasing melatonin, dropping body temperature, slowing heart rate, Diana's body doesn't get the memo until after midnight. She's not choosing to be a night owl. Her genetics loaded the gun. Scientists have discovered that some people inherit slower running clocks, passed down through families like eye color or height. Specific genes with names like period 2 and cryptochrome. These are the molecular gears of our internal timekeeper. And when they're different, so is your rhythm. But imagine the opposite problem. Meet Eleanor, a 69-year-old retired teacher who hasn't seen the end of a movie in years. Not because she doesn't want to. Her body simply shuts down by 6 p.m. whether she likes it or not. She's fully awake at 3 a.m. making coffee in the dark while her husband sleeps. This is advanced sleep phase disorder. Her clock runs fast instead of slow, always hours ahead of everyone else's schedule.
Marcus's situation might be the cruelest of all. Remember how our internal clocks naturally run longer than 24 hours? Most of us never notice because light resets us each day. But Marcus can't see that light. His clock just keeps drifting. 24.5 hours one day, 24.7 the next, sometimes even 25 hours. It's called non-24-hour sleep-wake disorder. And it's like living in permanent jet lag where bedtime moves later and later, cycling completely around the clock every few weeks. Imagine trying to hold down a job when your sleep schedule shifts 2 hours later every week. Imagine the loneliness of being wide awake when everyone else is asleep, needing to sleep when the world is bustling with activity. Then there's Dorothy. She's 76, living with dementia, and her family watches helplessly as her sleep falls apart like a shattered mirror. 20-minute naps at 2 p.m., wide awake at 3 a.m. trying to cook breakfast, another nap at 10 a.m. Her sleep has become chaos, scattered fragments throughout the day and night. This is irregular sleep-wake rhythm disorder, where the brain's master timekeeper itself is breaking down, leaving her adrift in a world without time. Miguel represents millions of essential workers whose bodies pay the price for keeping our 24/7 world running. Shift work sleep disorder is what happens when we force our ancient biology to serve modern demands. Every night shift, his body fights the unnatural schedule. His temperature rhythm stays locked to daylight patterns, his melatonin production rebels against the artificial routine, and his digestive system can't figure out when it's supposed to work. And then there's Jennifer, a corporate consultant who flies between continents like other people commute across town. London on Monday, Singapore on Wednesday, New York by Friday. Each trip sends her body into temporal chaos, jet lag disorder. Her internal clock is constantly trying to catch up, constantly confused about what time zone to follow. Each journey costs her days of productivity, waves of nausea, and the strange disorientation of feeling hungry at midnight and exhausted at noon. 6 different patterns, 6 different struggles, but all connected by the same profound truth. We live in a world built for one rhythm, while millions march to the beat of a different biological drum. But here's where the story takes a turn toward hope. Once you understand your rhythm, once you map the unique pattern of your internal clock, you can work with it instead of constantly fighting against it. Light becomes medicine. Not just any light, but bright, precisely timed light therapy that can actually reset your biological clock.
For someone like Diana, whose sleep comes too late, morning light therapy, delivered at exactly the right moment, can gradually convince her brain that the day begins earlier. Think of it as an artificial sunrise, perfectly calibrated to shift her internal timekeeper. For Eleanor, who falls asleep too early, evening light can extend her internal day, keeping her alert a little longer. For Marcus, whose clock drifts endlessly, carefully timed light exposure can sometimes catch that free-running rhythm and anchor it to a 24-hour world. Then there's melatonin. Not the megadoses sold in drugstores, but tiny, precisely timed amounts that whisper to your brain about when darkness should begin. It's not a sledgehammer to knock you unconscious. It's a gentle nudge to a system that just needs a little guidance about when night falls. But here's what's crucial. This isn't one-size-fits-all medicine. Miguel might need bright light during his night shift and blackout curtains during the day. Jennifer might need melatonin timed to her destination, not her departure. Diana might need a gradually shifting bedtime, working backward until her natural rhythm meets the world's schedule. It's about learning to read your own biological signature and helping it dance with the world's rhythm instead of fighting it. But we need to talk about something else: the invisible burden that comes with living on a different schedule than everyone else. Think about the language we use. Night owl, not a morning person, bad sleeper. These sound like personality traits, like choices people make. But for millions, they're biological realities as fixed as being left-handed or having green eyes. Diana has been called lazy her entire life. Miguel's family doesn't understand his irritability. They can't see the chronic exhaustion, the way his body rebels against working when it wants to sleep. Marcus faces a world designed for people who sleep at night and wake with the sun, while his rhythm drifts through a completely different cycle. If you've ever felt like your energy peaks when everyone else is winding down, if you've ever been wide awake at 2 a.m. with a mind full of ideas while the world expects you to sleep, if you've ever felt like your body was running on a different timetable entirely, you're not broken. You're not lazy. Your rhythm might just be different. And that difference isn't just okay. In our ancestors' world, having people alert at different times meant someone was always watching, always ready. Your unusual rhythm might be evolution's gift, not its mistake. We've journeyed through the intricate world of biological time, exploring how our internal clocks try to stay synchronized with the spinning of our planet, and what happens when that ancient partnership breaks down. We've seen how light can become medicine, how understanding your rhythm can transform your relationship with sleep itself. But our exploration of sleep's mysteries is far from over. Because for some people, the boundary between sleeping and waking isn't just blurred, it's completely shattered. What happens when your body sleeps, but your mind doesn't get the message? What happens when people walk through their houses with open eyes but closed minds? When they scream at invisible threats, fight unseen enemies, and wake up with no memory of the battles they fought in the darkness? Next, we venture into the strange and sometimes terrifying world of parasomnias, where sleep doesn't bring peace, but chaos, where the line between dreams and reality disappears, and sleeping becomes an adventure you never signed up for. Because sometimes the most fascinating thing about sleep isn't when it happens, but what happens to us while we're there.
There's a moment, somewhere between 2 and 4 a.m., when the Jones household transforms into something from another world. Hannah sits up in bed, eyes wide open, but seeing nothing. Down the hall, her father methodically rearranges furniture in the living room, his movements deliberate but wrong, like watching someone perform a play they've never rehearsed. And in the master bedroom, their mother thrashes against invisible attackers,
throwing punches at shadows that exist only in her dreams. 3 people, 1 house, all asleep, all acting out stories their conscious minds will never remember. We've journeyed through sleep disorders that steal rest, that stop breathing, that create phantom sensations in our legs. But what happens when sleep doesn't just malfunction? What happens when it stages a rebellion? When your sleeping brain decides to take your body for a walk, to scream with your voice, to fight with your fists? Now we enter the theater of Parasomnias, sleep's strangest performance, where the actors never remember their roles, but the audience never forgets the show. To understand how sleep can go so spectacularly wrong, we need to peek behind the curtain of what normally keeps our nights peaceful. Think of healthy sleep like a well-orchestrated symphony, different sections of your brain taking turns, playing their parts in perfect harmony. During deep non-REM sleep, your body should be still, your mind quiet. During REM sleep, that's rapid eye movement sleep, where most vivid dreams happen, your body should be completely paralyzed, locked in place while your brain plays its nightly movies. Parasomnias happen when these sections start playing out of sync, when parts of your brain wake up while others stay asleep. It's like having the orchestra's percussion section suddenly decide to perform a solo while everyone else is still tuning their instruments. Let's return to Hannah's father, John. For 3 months now, his wife Janet has been finding evidence of his nocturnal activities. Kitchen cabinets reorganized, books moved from shelf to shelf. Once, she discovered him watering plants at 3 a.m., plants that didn't need water, with a watering can that was completely empty. This is sleepwalking, and it's far more complex than its simple name suggests. John isn't just confused or restless. His brain has entered what sleep scientists call a mixed state. Part of his mind deep in non-REM sleep, while the motor control centers wake up just enough to move his body around. It's like someone turned on the car while the driver is still dreaming. Here's what makes sleepwalking so unsettling. The person isn't unconscious in the way we usually think about it. John can navigate around furniture, open doors, even perform complex tasks. He's operating on sleep brain logic, where watering plants with an empty can makes perfect sense. Most sleepwalking episodes are harmless, weird but harmless. But not always. John's neighbor once found him standing on his front porch at 2 a.m. in January, barefoot in the snow, trying to unlock a car that wasn't his. Sleepwalkers have driven miles from home, cooked elaborate meals, even had conversations they won't remember. Their bodies become capable actors in a play their conscious minds never auditioned for. Sleepwalking tends to run in families. If your parent wandered the halls at night, there's a good chance you might too. Stress makes it worse, alcohol can trigger it, and sleep deprivation practically sends out an invitation. But Marcus represents just one type of parasomnia performance. Sometimes the show is much louder. At 1:17 a.m., 9-year-old Hannah shoots upright in bed like she's been launched by a spring. Her scream cuts through the house, not the cry of a child having a bad dream, but something primal, desperate, like she's fighting for her life. Her parents rush in to find her sitting up, eyes wide open with absolute terror, pushing away anyone who tries to comfort her. But here's the thing that stops Janet and John cold. Hannah isn't seeing them. She's not seeing anything in their world at all. This is a night terror, and it's completely different from a nightmare. When you have a nightmare, you're in REM sleep, dreaming, and you usually remember fragments when you wake up. Night terrors happen during deep non-REM sleep, the deepest part of sleep where memories are rarely formed.
Hannah is experiencing pure, undiluted fear, but there's no story attached to it, no monster she can describe, no dream she can recall. Think of it like your brain's alarm system going off during a fire drill when there's no fire. All the fear responses activate: increased heart rate, sweating, the overwhelming need to escape, but there's nothing actually threatening her. Her conscious mind isn't even present to understand what's happening. She's trapped in a fear response with no way to reason her way out of it. For Janet and John, watching their child in this state is excruciating. Every parental instinct screams at them to comfort her, but nothing they do makes any difference. She doesn't recognize their voices, their touch, their presence. They're watching their child experience terror while being completely powerless to help. The silver lining? Most children outgrow night terrors as their brains mature and learn to transition between sleep stages more smoothly. But while they're happening, they transform the whole family's relationship with nighttime. Every creak in the house makes parents tense, waiting for that scream that might or might not come.
Meanwhile, in the master bedroom, Helen, Janet's mother visiting for the month, is having her own nocturnal drama, but her story is different and far more concerning. Helen's dreams have always been vivid, but lately, they've become physical. She wakes up with bruises she can't explain, a nightstand drawer pulled completely out, her reading glasses shattered on the floor. Last week, she punched a hole in the drywall. In her dream, she was fighting off an intruder who had cornered her in an alley. In reality, she was throwing haymakers at her bedroom wall. This is REM sleep behavior disorder, or RBD, and it represents sleep's most dangerous malfunction. Remember how during REM sleep, dream sleep, your body should be completely paralyzed? That paralysis is crucial. It's what keeps your dreams safely locked in your head, preventing you from acting out every chase scene, every fight, every moment of dream panic. In RBD, that natural paralysis fails. It's like the safety lock on a gun stopping working. Suddenly, dreams have the power to move your real body, to throw real punches, to make you run into real walls. Helen's husband started sleeping in the guest room after she threw a punch that missed his jaw by inches. She was dreaming about protecting him from attackers, but in the real world, she had become the danger he needed protection from. The irony is heartbreaking. Her dream self, trying to save the person her sleeping body, was actually threatening. But RBD carries implications beyond bruised knuckles and broken lamps. In many cases, it's the first sign of deeper neurological changes, often appearing years or even decades before conditions like Parkinson's disease or Lewy body dementia. The same brain changes that disrupt the natural paralysis of REM sleep often signal other transformations happening in the shadows. Diagnosing RBD requires spending a night in a sleep lab where doctors can watch the brain fail to paralyze the body during REM sleep. Treatment usually involves medications like clonazepam or melatonin, but it also means turning the bedroom into a fortress, padded headboards, mattresses on the floor, anything sharp or breakable locked away. Because when dreams become physical, the real world becomes a battlefield. Step back from the Jones house for a moment and consider what we're really witnessing. This isn't just about weird sleep behavior. We're watching how one person's sleep disorder becomes everyone's reality. Janet now locks all the doors and hides the car keys before bed, not to keep intruders out, but to keep John in. She's installed cameras in Hannah's room, not for security, but to understand what they're witnessing during those terrifying episodes. Helen feels guilty about bruises she gave herself while trying to protect others in her dreams. Sleep, which should be private and restorative, has become a family project requiring vigilance, accommodation, and worry. The person with the parasomnia often feels the worst.
guilty for actions they don't remember, afraid of their own bodies, questioning whether they can trust themselves to sleep safely. But these disorders strip away one of our most basic assumptions, that we have control over our own bodies. They ask uncomfortable questions. Who are you when you're not conscious? What does it mean to be responsible for actions you don't remember? How do you love someone who might unknowingly hurt you in their sleep? But parasomnias represent just one way sleep can betray our expectations. We've explored what happens when the body moves without the mind's permission, when dreams leak into reality, when fear strikes without reason. Now we're about to encounter the opposite extreme, a disorder where the mind wakes up completely, but the body remains locked in sleep's grip, where consciousness returns in full, but movement remains impossible, where you become a prisoner in your own bed, aware of everything, but able to do nothing. And sometimes, in that vulnerable space between sleep and waking, you discover you're not alone in the room. Welcome to sleep paralysis, where consciousness becomes a cage, and the night holds terrors that feel more real than reality itself.
Nina's story began like so many others we've explored, with sleep that should have been restorative becoming something far more sinister. At 3:17 a.m., her eyes snapped open in the darkness. 26 years old, a graduate student who thought she understood the boundaries between sleeping and waking, Nina was about to discover that those boundaries are far more fragile than any of us realize. She tried to call out to her roommate in the next room, but her voice had vanished completely. Her vocal cords might as well have been severed. She commanded her arms to move, her legs to shift, even a single finger to wiggle, but her body had become a prison. Fully conscious, fully aware, yet utterly paralyzed in her own flesh. Then came the presence. A shadow materialized at the foot of her bed. Not quite human, not quite anything she could name. It seemed crafted from darkness itself, its edges writhing and pulsing with malevolent life. The figure didn't advance, yet somehow its presence consumed the entire room, filling every corner with crushing dread. Nina's heart hammered so violently she was certain it would burst, yet she couldn't even gasp for the air her lungs desperately needed. What Nina experienced that night wasn't unique to her, or even to our modern world. It's a phenomenon that has terrorized humans across every culture, every century, every continent where people have dared to close their eyes and surrender to sleep. This is sleep paralysis, perhaps the most universally frightening experience the human brain can conjure. It's what happens when the elegant dance between consciousness and dreams becomes catastrophically out of sync. To understand what Nina experienced, we need to peek behind the curtain of how our brains orchestrate sleep. Think of your brain during REM sleep, that's rapid eye movement sleep, where our most vivid dreams occur, as conducting two separate orchestras simultaneously. One orchestra plays the symphony of dreams, creating the rich, often bizarre narratives that unfold in our minds. The other orchestra ensures that our bodies remain perfectly still, preventing us from acting out those dreams and potentially harming ourselves. This bodily stillness has a scientific name: REM atonia. Atonia simply means without muscle tone. Essentially, your brain sends powerful signals down your spinal cord that effectively disconnect your motor neurons from your muscles. It's like temporarily cutting the wires between your brain's commands and your body's ability to respond. This paralysis is so complete that if someone were to lift your arm during deep REM sleep, it would fall limply back to the bed. Under normal circumstances, this system works flawlessly. You dream of running, but your legs stay still. You dream of shouting, but you remain silent.
You dream of fighting monsters, but you don't throw punches at your sleeping partner. But sometimes, and this is where sleep paralysis enters the picture, this normally seamless transition breaks down. Your conscious mind awakens while your body remains locked in that protective paralysis. You're caught between two worlds, awake enough to perceive your actual bedroom, to hear real sounds like the hum of the refrigerator or traffic outside, to feel the weight of your blankets, but still neurologically connected to the dream state, where nightmares can bleed into your waking perception. Imagine being a passenger in your own body, watching helplessly as your mind creates threats that feel absolutely real, while your body refuses every desperate command to flee or fight. During these episodes, your consciousness becomes hyper-vigilant, while your body lies motionless as stone. Often, the only part of you that responds to your frantic mental commands is your eyes, darting back and forth as you search for escape or explanation. You can usually breathe, though many people report feeling suffocated, as if an enormous weight is crushing their chest. This sensation isn't merely psychological. The accessory muscles that help you take those deep, satisfying breaths, the ones you use when you sigh or yawn, are affected by the same paralysis gripping the rest of your body. You're left with only the most basic breathing reflex, which can feel frighteningly inadequate when your mind is screaming for more oxygen. Your brain's ancient alarm system, the amygdala, floods your system with stress hormones. This almond-shaped structure, buried deep in your brain, evolved to detect threats and trigger our fight-or-flight response. But during sleep paralysis, it's detecting something unprecedented. You're perceiving danger while being completely unable to respond to it. The amygdala goes into overdrive, screaming warnings, while your rational prefrontal cortex struggles to interpret signals it was never designed to understand. This creates a perfect storm of terror. Your threat detection system is operating at maximum capacity, searching desperately for explanations for why you can't move, why breathing feels difficult, why something feels fundamentally wrong with your reality.
The hallucinations that accompany sleep paralysis aren't random. They fall into three distinct categories, each reflecting different aspects of how your brain interprets this neurological confusion. The intruder is perhaps the most universally reported experience. A shadowy presence in your room, sometimes human-shaped, sometimes formless, always malevolent. People describe hooded figures standing in corners, dark shapes moving at the periphery of their vision, or simply an overwhelming sense that something evil has entered their space. This hallucination likely stems from your brain's attempt to explain why your threat detection system is in such a state of alarm. If danger is being detected, the logic goes, there must be an intruder. The incubus experience involves crushing pressure, typically on the chest. You might feel as though someone or something is sitting on you, pressing down with incredible weight. Some people report sensing hands around their throat or feeling as though they're being strangled. This hallucination appears to be your brain's interpretation of the subtle changes in breathing that come with REM muscle paralysis. When your breathing feels restricted, your mind creates an external cause. Something must be physically constraining you. The vestibular motor hallucinations are perhaps the most otherworldly. These involve sensations of movement when your body is perfectly still. You might feel yourself floating above your bed, looking down at your paralyzed form. Others experience spinning, falling through space, or the sensation that their soul is separating from their body. These occur when your brain's sense of spatial orientation, controlled by your vestibular system in your inner ear, gets scrambled by the conflicting signals of consciousness and REM sleep. What makes sleep paralysis particularly fascinating is how consistent the experience remains across cultures, despite vastly different explanations for what's happening. Throughout history, when science couldn't explain what people felt, culture filled in the terrifying blanks. In Newfoundland, they spoke of the old hag, a witch who would sit on sleepers' chests, stealing their breath in the night. Japanese folklore describes kanashibari, being bound by invisible metal chains, usually attributed to vengeful spirits seeking retribution. Mexican tradition speaks of se me subió el muerto, literally, a dead body climbed on top of me. Among the Hmong people, many of whom fled to America after the Vietnam War, there exists a belief in a pressing spirit that attempts to asphyxiate sleepers. In the 1980s, some Hmong communities experienced sudden, unexplained nocturnal deaths, particularly among young men. While cultural beliefs about sleep paralysis may have contributed to fear and distress, the deaths were more likely linked to genetic cardiac conditions, such as Brugada syndrome, rather than directly caused by fear itself. In our modern era, we've created new mythologies around the same ancient experience. Many reported alien abduction experiences, complete with paralysis, pressure on the chest, and the presence of gray figures, match perfectly with sleep paralysis episodes. The brain, seeking to explain the unexplainable, draws from contemporary cultural narratives just as it did centuries ago. But here's the remarkable constant. Whether you're a medieval peasant, a Hmong refugee, or a modern graduate student like Nina, the core experience remains identical. The paralysis, the presence, the crushing weight, the overwhelming terror. Only our cultural interpretation changes, shaped by the stories our societies tell about what lurks in the darkness. Understanding what causes sleep paralysis reads like a catalog of contemporary life's pressures. Sleep deprivation tops the list, that badge of honor we wear for staying up too late, working too hard, scrolling through screens when we should be resting. Our culture celebrates the hustle, but our brains pay the price in the form of disrupted sleep architecture. Irregular schedules wreak havoc on our circadian rhythms. Shift workers, frequent travelers crossing time zones, and anyone whose sleep schedule varies dramatically from day to day create confusion in the delicate neural systems that govern sleep transitions. Your brain relies on predictable patterns, and when those patterns are constantly disrupted, the boundaries between sleep stages become unstable. Anxiety and stress create a particularly cruel cycle. Worry about sleep makes sleep itself more elusive, and poor sleep amplifies anxiety. For some people, the fear of experiencing another episode of sleep paralysis becomes so intense that bedtime itself triggers anxiety, making episodes more likely to occur. Then there are the deeper currents flowing through families. Sleep paralysis often runs in genetic lines, suggesting inherited vulnerabilities in how our brains manage sleep transitions. For others, it's connected to conditions like narcolepsy, where the normal boundaries between sleep stages become permeable throughout the day and night. Sometimes the triggers are surprisingly mundane. Many people report that sleeping on their backs increases their likelihood of experiencing an episode, though scientists are still investigating why body position might affect this neurological process. Certain medications, particularly those that affect neurotransmitter levels, can influence REM sleep patterns. Even alcohol, which initially suppresses REM sleep, can create a rebound effect hours later when your brain tries to catch up on lost REM time, leaving you vulnerable to these midnight invasions of consciousness.
If you've experienced sleep paralysis, you're not alone, and you're certainly not losing your mind. Medical professionals estimate that between 7 and 8% of the general population has experienced at least one episode,
with rates climbing much higher among people with certain risk factors. Diagnosing sleep paralysis often begins with pattern recognition. Is this a once-in-a-lifetime experience, or does it recur regularly? Are episodes clustered around periods of stress, sleep deprivation, or schedule changes? Are there underlying conditions like narcolepsy, sleep apnea, or anxiety disorders that might be contributing? Sometimes a sleep study is necessary, spending a night in a lab where specialists can monitor your brain waves, eye movements, breathing, and muscle activity throughout the sleep cycle. This allows them to map the architecture of your sleep and identify where the normal transitions between stages might be breaking down. The key diagnostic criteria include the frequency and duration of episodes, your level of awareness during the event, and the presence of hallucinations. Unlike the hallucinations associated with psychiatric conditions, people experiencing sleep paralysis typically retain some insight that what they're seeing isn't entirely real, even as their terror feels absolutely genuine. It's crucial to distinguish sleep paralysis from other conditions that might cause similar symptoms. Certain types of seizures can cause temporary paralysis, but they typically don't come with the vivid, dreamlike imagery. Panic attacks can create similar feelings of terror and immobility, but without the specific connection to REM sleep transitions. Most importantly, sleep paralysis is not a sign of mental illness, supernatural interference, or alien visitation, despite what cultural narratives might suggest. It's a glitch in the magnificent, complex system that governs our sleep, common, temporary, and ultimately harmless to your physical health, though the psychological impact can be profound. The path to better sleep doesn't always require dramatic intervention. For many people, the foundation of treatment is elegantly simple: better sleep hygiene. This means consistent bedtimes and wake times, even on weekends. It means creating a sleep environment that signals to your brain that it's time to rest, cool, dark, and quiet. It means avoiding the screens that flood our retinas with blue light just when our brains should be ramping down for the night. For those dealing with frequent episodes, stress management becomes crucial. Whether through meditation, yoga, therapy, or other techniques, finding ways to calm an overactive nervous system can reduce the likelihood of sleep paralysis. Some people discover that avoiding sleeping on their backs helps, though the scientific evidence for this remains mixed. When episodes are severe or frequent enough to significantly impact quality of life, medications might be recommended. Certain antidepressants, particularly SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, can reduce the amount of REM sleep and minimize the window where sleep paralysis is likely to occur. However, medication is rarely the first line of treatment and works best when combined with other approaches. Perhaps the most powerful treatment is knowledge itself. Understanding that the shadow figure is your brain's attempt to make sense of conflicting neural signals. Recognizing that the crushing weight reflects your breathing muscles being affected by natural REM paralysis. Knowing that the experience, however terrifying, is temporary and will eventually pass. Some people learn techniques to break out of episodes, focusing on small movements like wiggling a finger or toe, sometimes the only parts of the body that retain some voluntary control during the paralysis. Others find that simply understanding the phenomenon dramatically reduces their fear, transforming sleep paralysis from a supernatural assault into a curious quirk of neurobiology. Nina, whom we met at the beginning of this journey, learned to recognize the early warning signs of an impending episode. The slight tingling sensation as she drifted toward sleep, the sense of sinking too deeply, too quickly into unconsciousness. She developed her own strategies, adjusting her sleep position, managing her stress through regular exercise and meditation, maintaining a consistent sleep schedule even when her graduate studies demanded otherwise. She still experiences episodes occasionally, but they no longer dominate her nights with dread. When the shadow figure appears now, she recognizes it for what it is, her brain's storytelling attempt to explain the unexplainable. It's still unsettling, but it's no longer supernatural. It's neuroscience, not nightmares. Sleep paralysis represents something profound about the human experience. It sits at the intersection of our most ancient fears and our most modern understanding of the brain. It reminds us that consciousness itself is more fragile and more complex than we often acknowledge. The line between sleeping and waking, between real and unreal, between safe and dangerous, is far thinner than most of us realize. For the millions of people living with various sleep disorders, this fragility isn't academic. It's a daily reality that shapes how they move through the world. But here's what's remarkable. Understanding these experiences, naming them, and recognizing their biological basis doesn't diminish human resilience. Instead, it highlights the incredible adaptability of the human spirit. Which brings us to our final exploration. What it means to live day by day, night by night, with sleep that doesn't follow the rules. How do people build meaningful lives when one of our most basic biological functions becomes a source of challenge rather than restoration? How do families adapt, relationships evolve, and communities support those whose relationship with sleep is complicated? The answers, as we'll discover, reveal some of the most inspiring aspects of human nature. Our capacity to adapt, to find hope in the darkest hours, and to create meaning even when our most fundamental experiences are turned upside down.
Imagine it's 3 a.m., and while the world sleeps peacefully around you, you're wide awake again. Your mind races through tomorrow's tasks, last week's conversations, next month's worries. Sound familiar? You're not alone in this midnight vigil. Right now, as you listen to these words, millions of people are lying in beds across the globe fighting the same invisible battle you might know all too well. Throughout this video, we've journeyed through the landscape of sleep disorders, from the relentless wakefulness of insomnia to the sudden sleep attacks of narcolepsy, from the breathing interruptions of sleep apnea to the mysterious world of parasomnias, where people walk, talk, and even drive while technically asleep. But now, let's talk about something we haven't fully addressed: what it's really like to live with these conditions in a world that doesn't always understand. Here's the thing about sleep disorders that nobody tells you: they're invisible disabilities. When the teacher we met earlier stands in front of her classroom after another sleepless night, her students see an educator, not someone who's been awake for 30 hours straight. When Michael, the father with sleep apnea, nods off during his daughter's school play, other parents might assume he's just tired from work. Not that his breathing stopped 47 times the night before, jolting him awake each time his oxygen levels dropped dangerously low. The cruelest part isn't the physical exhaustion, it's the isolation that follows. It's being labeled as antisocial when you're too drained to join friends for dinner. It's being called unreliable when you cancel plans because you've hit what feels like an invisible wall of fatigue. It's the well-meaning advice that cuts deep. Have you tried chamomile tea? Maybe you should exercise more. You just need to develop better sleep habits. As if you haven't tried everything. As if this is somehow your fault. Here's what we need to understand. Sleep disorders aren't character flaws disguised as medical conditions.
They're complex neurobiological realities rooted in how our brains and bodies actually function. When Alara describes that crawling sensation that makes her legs feel like they're on fire, she's not exaggerating. Her nervous system is literally misfiring, sending false signals that create an irresistible urge to move. The dopamine pathways in her brain, the same chemical circuits involved in movement and reward, aren't working properly. When Nina experiences sleep paralysis, feeling like a demon is sitting on his chest while he's trapped in his own body, it's not supernatural. It's a fascinating and terrifying glitch in his sleep architecture. During REM sleep, our brains naturally paralyze our bodies to prevent us from acting out our dreams. For Nina, consciousness returns before that paralysis lifts, creating a waking nightmare that feels more real than reality itself. Understanding the science doesn't diminish the struggle, it validates it. It says, this is real, this is medical, this is not your fault. We live in a culture that has somehow turned sleep into a moral failing. We celebrate the entrepreneur who boasts about functioning on 4 hours of sleep. We wear exhaustion like a badge of honor. We say, I'll sleep when I'm dead, not realizing that chronic sleep deprivation is literally shortening our lives. But here's what the research tells us, what sleep specialists around the world know, and what every person struggling with a sleep disorder needs to hear. You are not weak. You are not broken. You are fighting a medical condition that affects your most fundamental biological need, rest. And here's the beautiful truth hidden in all this darkness. There is help, real, evidence-based help. Sleep medicine has evolved dramatically. There are sleep clinics where specialists can map exactly what happens in your brain and body during the night. Overnight sleep studies called polysomnography can detect everything from the subtle breathing interruptions of sleep apnea to the abnormal muscle activity of periodic limb movement disorder. For insomnia, there's cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, CBTI, which research shows is more effective than sleeping pills for long-term relief. It doesn't just treat symptoms, it retrains your brain's relationship with sleep itself. For sleep apnea, CPAP machines, those devices that gently push air through a mask, can literally be life-saving, preventing the dangerous drops in oxygen that damage your heart and brain night after night. For chronic movement disorders, like restless legs, medications that work on dopamine pathways can finally quiet those screaming nerve signals. The ripple effects of treating sleep disorders extend far beyond individual lives. When we fix sleep, we don't just improve nights, we transform entire communities. This isn't just about feeling less tired. This is about parents who can be fully present with their children instead of moving through days in a fog of exhaustion. It's about workers who can think clearly and work safely instead of becoming workplace accident statistics. It's about students who can learn and remember instead of struggling to focus. It's about relationships that can flourish instead of being strained by the constant presence of fatigue as an unwelcome third party. Consider this. Drowsy driving is a major public health concern, contributing to thousands of deaths annually, though drunk driving remains a leading cause of traffic fatalities. Chronic sleep deprivation costs our economy hundreds of billions of dollars in lost productivity, medical expenses, and accidents. Chronic sleep loss is linked to heart disease, stroke, diabetes, depression, and even Alzheimer's disease. When we treat sleep disorders, we're not just helping individuals, we're strengthening the fabric of society itself. So where does this leave you? Maybe you recognized yourself in these stories. Maybe you've been carrying this weight alone for too long. Maybe you've been told it's just stress, or that you need to try harder to sleep. Here's your permission to stop trying so hard and start seeking help instead. If you consistently feel unrefreshed despite spending adequate time in bed, if you snore loudly and wake up gasping,
if your legs feel restless at night, if you fall asleep at inappropriate times, if you experience frightening episodes during sleep, these aren't quirks or weaknesses. They're symptoms of treatable medical conditions. Start somewhere, anywhere. Keep a sleep diary for 2 weeks. Note when you go to bed, when you actually fall asleep, how many times you wake up, how you feel in the morning. Take the Epworth Sleepiness Scale online to assess your daytime fatigue. Talk to your doctor about a referral to a sleep specialist. Join online support groups where you'll find thousands of people who understand exactly what you're going through. Sleep is perhaps the most democratic of human needs. We all need it, we all struggle with it sometimes, and we all deserve to experience its restorative power. In a world that never stops moving, that's always demanding more productivity, more engagement, more energy, choosing to prioritize your sleep isn't selfish, it's revolutionary. What would your life look like if you could wake up feeling truly rested? What would your relationships become if exhaustion wasn't always lurking in the background? What dreams, literal and metaphorical, might you finally have the energy to pursue? The stories we've shared tonight aren't just about sleep disorders. They're about the fundamental human right to rest, to heal, to wake up ready to embrace life fully. They're about recognizing that in our shared vulnerability, in our common need for restoration, we find our deepest connection to one another. Sleep well isn't just something we say at bedtime. It's a wish, a hope, a recognition that rest is sacred. And for those still searching for that elusive peaceful night, know this: your journey toward better sleep is not a solitary one. Help exists, hope exists, healing is possible. The night doesn't have to be your enemy. It can become your sanctuary.